Okay, we are live. So, hello everyone, and welcome to another episode of Talk Beliefs. My name is Shawn. I'm a correspondent of the Talk Beliefs channel, a friend from down under. And today we're going to have a discussion between me and two of my friends. So, who we are, just a quick introduction. Talk Beliefs is a YouTube channel run by Mark. He's a friend of mine from the UK. And as the name suggests, it's really talking about beliefs. So it's an open discussion about religion, about our religious worldviews, epistemology, how and why we believe what we believe. So as to who I am, I'm pretty comfortable giving myself the label of an ex-Mormon. And Leo and Jaxon, I'll allow them to introduce their stories in more detail, but I think both of you are comfortable to take on the label of believing Mormons. Is that correct?
Yeah.
Cool. So hi to Leo and Jaxon. Thanks for coming on the show.
Thank you, Shawn.
So just to give an introduction, all three of us have similar backgrounds. As far as I understand, we've all been raised Mormon, but we have come to different conclusions as to the truth value of Mormonism. So what we hope to do today is have an open discussion where we talk about ideas, we talk about the concepts of Mormonism, and we basically openly and honestly talk about how we feel about certain of the truth claims and maybe some other related topics. So I'm just going to do some housekeeping before we begin, and after I'm done with the housekeeping, we'll hand over to both Leo and Jaxon to give a short introduction about themselves, 4 to 5 minutes each. So yeah, let's do that housekeeping. I want to give a context as to how this interview came about. So as I mentioned, Talk Beliefs is a channel that talks about all sorts of beliefs. There are several playlists on the channel that talk about Mormonism, Jehovah's Witnesses, Scientology, Exclusive Brethren, all sorts of different religious worldviews. And there are some videos that are debates between, say, for example, creationism and evolution, and also some interviews with ex-members and members of various religions to sort of openly explore their belief systems. So the context of this interview is that Leo, our friend, actually came onto the channel and basically in the comments offered his help to Mormons or non-Mormons who had questions about Mormonism, basically to respond to the different criticisms. So I had a chat with Mark, who runs the channel, and we actually thought it would be a cool idea to give Leo a platform where he can talk about his sort of the defense of the critiques of Mormonism. And Leo also requested to bring his friend Jaxon along, which is all good. So Jaxon is here too. So just to give some background, what are we trying to achieve today? This conversation is primarily about ideas and the truth value or truthfulness of those ideas. So we may discuss people. For example, I don't think it's possible to have a discussion about Mormonism without mentioning Joseph Smith. But in particular, we're not here to bash or defend Joseph Smith per se, but to discuss the ideas that he put forward, the things that he suggested were true. So it's not about people, it's about their ideas. And another thing I like to say up front is we are walking into this conversation on all sides, knowing that we have highly contrasting worldviews. We know that we disagree fundamentally on whether or not Mormonism is true, and there are a lot of different implications of that. So we've all had this discussion before, that we understand that we're on different sides of the equation, but I think that we can still have a respectful, interesting dialogue, and it's likely that we'll still disagree at the end, probably to the same extent that we do right now, but we can be respectful in how we disagree. And there's actually a sentence that a Mormon apostle said in one of his talks: we can disagree without being disagreeable. So I think that that's an important thing to say up front, that we know we have highly contrasting worldviews. We know that we disagree on certain things, but I think it's possible to have thoughtful, interesting, honest debate in any case. And I hope by that we are setting a standard for this kind of debate, because I think the open sharing of ideas around the world is one of the most important values that we should all embrace. The sort of, I think we are fundamentally supporters of free speech. So I think that's my introduction. Do either of you have any comments, or you agree with everything there as a premise?
No, I'm just really grateful that you're providing this platform for us, Shawn. You know, like you talked about, you know, having open and honest discussions. I'm looking forward to having one of those tonight.
Cool.
And you know, should be good.
Awesome. Cool. Thanks. Okay. So I think let's just turn over to introductions. Which of you would like to introduce yourselves first?
Jaxon, you want to go?
Sure, I'll go. Hello, everyone. My name is Jaxon Washburn. I'm an 18-year-old member of the Church of Jesus Christ of Latter-day Saints. I live in Arizona. I recently graduated from high school here, and I'm in the process now of getting ready to attend Arizona State University, where I'm going to be majoring in religious studies. After that, after hopefully a semester of studying, I will be leaving to serve a mission for the LDS Church, and where I'll be a Mormon missionary for 2 years. But essentially, the important things to know about me is just that I'm very passionate about religious studies. I've been very involved with interfaith and with bringing people of differing worldviews together for dialogue, discussion, and open engagement. That way we can learn about each other. Part of my backstory is when I was 12 years old, my mother, I was raised in a fully Mormon family, you know, with 2 active believing parents. And when I was 12 years old, my mom decided to leave the church. She became a born-again Christian. And so it was then that we kind of became an interfaith family. I had a dad who was Mormon, a mom who was Christian. So me and my siblings would go to both churches each Sunday, or we would switch off between either parent. And that was definitely a very interesting part of my life, and served as a direct catalyst for me to get into both studying my own faith in which I was raised, and a lot of other faiths and worldviews that I hadn't really been exposed to before. It gave me a love of talking to people who were different than me, of going to their places of worship, or just reading their sacred texts, or you know, their philosophical arguments. And so when I was in high school, I developed a student-led interfaith organization called the World Religion and Tolerance Society that respected and welcomed students of all different worldviews, whether they're religious or not, to come together to learn with each other. And we would just kind of learn about the world's religions and worldviews together. We would have guest speakers. We would go do acts of service based on our shared values. And so it was very, very interesting for me. And I'm grateful for it, because it made me appreciative of where each of us is coming from. Even though we're coming from different worldviews, I definitely see truth and beauty and a lot to appreciate in you know, people's different backgrounds and perspectives. And so I try my best not to be so much a critic of where other people are coming from, but rather just an advocate and someone who is just bent on discovering truth, whatever it is, and just living that. So I can just attest to my own faith journey. I went through an active faith crisis for several years. You know, I've dived into both critical and pro material when it comes to Mormonism. And it took me a couple of years to be actually comfortable with the term or identity of Mormon myself. But I would say I'm still on a path. I'm still dedicated to, you know, wherever this journey leads me. And, you know, that's kind of where my allegiance lies, is just, you know, where my journey takes me based off, you know, my rationality, my spirituality, and the things that I experience. And I think that's, you know, just something that all of us can and should follow in the end, no matter where it takes us.
Awesome. Yeah. I especially love your point that we're each on a journey, because often we will have discussions like these and we all have established worldviews, but in a sense, those worldviews are always under construction. And often we speak as if we are at a destination, when in actual fact we're on a road. And what life is. So that's great.
Yeah.
Leo, would you like to introduce yourself?
Yeah, you bet. Yeah, so first I want to say that to all my evangelical friends out there, Protestant friends, praise Jesus. That is number one. Because I know there's a lot of good folks out there that I've had some good dialogue with, and I'm sure that some of them would like to hear me praise my Savior, my Lord and Savior Jesus Christ. So I guess my background, my educational background is in psychology, 4-year degree, and then I've got a master's in business, and I'm a project manager, implementation manager for a marketing company. I think, Shawn, you're involved with marketing, right? So, and yeah, I mean, that's kind of me. I've got 3 little kids, keep me busy, and I got a sweet wife that she's patient with me, my better half, I guess you could say. So I mean, I'm just excited to be here, and also just want to let you know, Shawn, that I've been praying for you, bro. I love you, and I feel the love of God for you, brother.
Okay, thanks for that.
So, not to derail you. I don't want to do that, but just to bring a smile and say, I believe that God loves you, man. And whatever I can do to during this interview, after, I'm here for you, and if you ever do reconsider joining the faith, I'm here to help.
Great.
Well, I think we can both rest assured that Shawn is thinking for us. So as the comments
he's thinking for us, right? Yeah, you think and we'll pray.
That's right. Yeah. If you don't mind, I'll digress just briefly in a positive way. I'm not going to go into large depth about my view on God, but I do believe that much of what people believe about God or how God thinks or feels, I believe much of that is a projection of how we feel. So, for example, when people say, I don't know, God hates gay people, really, I think what they're saying is, I hate gay people. I'm just looking for a justification somewhere. So in a positive way, when people have very positive, liberal, open, loving views about who God is, really all that tells me is that's who they are. So when you say that you think God loves me, really what I read into it is that you love me. You're a good person and you feel for me. So that's my most honest reflection on that statement. And it's not a negative one. I'm not trying to derail you either. In fact, I take that even more positively. Instead of saying, oh, I think someone else loves me, I actually take it straight from you. So
sounds good, man.
Hope that works.
Yeah, cool. that sounds good.
So, okay. So cool. Great introduction. I'm actually not going to give an extensive introduction because I've been interviewed on Talk Beliefs before. And so people can go there to learn more about me. But a quick introduction is that I grew up in the LDS Church, and I grew up in South Africa. And at 19, I went to serve a mission, and I worked in Manchester in England for 2 years. So met a lot of great people, had a really incredible experience. I actually speak a lot about that experience on my Talk Beliefs interview. I think I have 2 interviews specifically about my mission. And in those interviews, I go in a sort of honest way as I see them today. So similar to how you spoke about sort of a balanced approach, I speak about what I didn't like and what I did like. And so it's all in there. But essentially, skipping ahead, I had a faith crisis in 2015. And I spent a lot of time researching, which both of you obviously have as well. Same idea, read critical material, read apologetics. I studied other religions extensively. I found that also very interesting. So eventually I came to the conclusion that I couldn't honestly believe in the LDS Church anymore. At least it's not what it claims to be, in my opinion, to the extent that I decided to move on from it. Having said that, what I tell, because I have very believing, highly engaged family, my mom, my dad, my family, most of them are believing Mormons, and all of my friends, or many of them at least, are believing Mormons. And so what they say to me is they think I'll come back. And what I say is it would take a miracle. And I think that actually balances both worldviews, because I don't believe in miracles, but they do. And
Gives us some hope, right? Yeah.
Yeah, that's right. And so I think that actually satisfies, that statement satisfies everybody, including me, about how I feel about it. So that's just a summary. But I mean, my relationship with and feelings towards the LDS Church are very complex, just like any long-term relationship. And I'm sure both of you feel the same way, given all that you've learned and that you know. And so I won't really go into them into detail, but I don't hate the church. I actually hope that it reforms in certain ways. I have a lot of hope for it, and I think that in some ways it's going in a positive direction. Not everyone agrees with that, but yes, that's a high-level summary. Cool. So any questions or comments before we enter the main discussion?
Well, can I just ask kind of the general worldview that you're coming from, Shawn? Would you peg yourself as more an atheist or an agnostic, or kind of how would you identify?
So I'll try not to make it too lengthy of an answer.
No worries.
Yeah. When I'm speaking with people who have a religious belief, I tend to use the word atheist because it's a shortcut to establish that it's likely whatever version of God you believe in, I don't. Mm-hmm. And from that point of view, I might as well be an atheist.
Okay.
Whether or not I'm an actual, whether or not I don't believe at all in any kind of creator is a more complex question.
Yeah.
But my most honest view is that most of, as I just mentioned with Leo's comment, my honest view is that most of what we think or believe a god or gods may be, I think most of that is a projection. I think even the very figure of God through the ages, for instance, what's that famous painting? I don't know if it's Michelangelo. You know, God's reaching out and his finger. Yeah. And it just so happens that God is a white male. And I remember seeing a painting redone where God was a black woman. Mm-hmm. And somehow people were highly offended by this idea. And so I wonder, why is it that God happens to be a white male? Or, you know, if you're a Hindu and you believe in, what's the name of the elephant god?
The Ganesh.
Ganesha. Yeah, Ganesha or something. You know, why is that god, why does it happen to resemble something in the backyard of the believers, aka an elephant, or the various, you know, Thor and Ra, etc. Why is it lightning and Zeus is lightning and Ra is the sun, etc. So my honest view is that most of the gods that humans believe in are projections or reshaping of the environment. Whether or not there's an ultimate purpose or creator, I don't believe in it. I'm not a theist, so I don't believe in an interventionist God. But you might consider me slightly a theist. I'm not really sure.
Okay.
So that's a high-level summary. I'm definitely a materialist, so I don't believe in the metaphysical. I don't believe there's anything beyond the physical universe. And yes, I know that consciousness is a hard problem. And yes, I know it's not easy to solve that hard problem. But as I think we all agreed before the chat, regardless of which worldview you have, there are certain challenges and problems with it.
Oh, absolutely.
Almost all of them will have issues that are unresolved. And I think we're all kind of comfortable with that as a fact. Cool. So does that answer the question?
Yeah, thank you. I was just curious, so I appreciate that.
No worries. Cool. So as I mentioned before, we've all prepared for this discussion, and in order to be upfront, I put together all of the questions that I'd like to ask you. Again, these are all general. I think they are basic in format, but I think they're very, you know, fundamentally important questions when it comes to our worldviews. And so I'm just going to go ahead to section number 1. By the way, although I put together this interview, and although it was sort of Leo who volunteered to so-called defend the faith, if you want to put it that way, still you two are open to asking questions or sort of throwing in, you know, starting discussions on different topics. Okay, so the first section that I put together here is what I call the burden of proof. So here are the first few basic questions. Now, we understand that not just Mormonism, but many religions in general, they make claims about the nature of the universe, about the purpose of life, why human life exists, what happens after this life, was there a life before? And we know that they have various models that are presented in various religions, contending for our attention and our belief. So the first section I thought would be important to discuss is the burden of proof. Where does this lie? So I just wanted to confirm and check if we're all on the same page about some basics. So the first one is, again, question to everyone here. What is your understanding of where the burden of proof lies with regards to LDS truth claims? Do you agree that the onus is on the LDS Church to provide evidence to support its truth claims, or do you think that people outside the church need to attempt to disprove the church?
I can jump in there and tackle that one. So yeah, I mean, I think the burden of proof really it falls on the person that's making the initial claim, right? So I guess every religion, like you say, has truth claims, and ours happen to be very unique, I think, in the fact that we claim to be the only true and living church on the earth. That's in one of our scriptures, right? But I guess I've often noticed that sometimes when I say truth claims there, go out and check it out for yourself, see if you find it to be true. I get the responses, well, Mormonism isn't true. I get that all the time online. And it's kind of, I guess, if you're going to make that claim, it's like, okay, well, then let's have you defend that claim, right? So yeah, I mean, I feel like the burden of proof falls on the person that initially makes the claim. Our claims there, we have I guess, a way to find out for yourself if our claims are true, and that's through scripture study and prayer. So asking God if He's there, and asking God if our church is the only true and living church on the earth, and I've done that, and I've felt like God.
Cool. Okay, Jaxon, I assume you're pretty much in agreement.
Actually, I was hoping to take it in a little bit different direction, if that's okay. One thing that'll happen, I'm guessing, in this interview, me and Leo, being different individuals with different, backgrounds, we approach these questions and these issues differently. And I'm not invalidating Leo's responses or invalidating my own or invalidating yours, Shawn. It's just people answer these differently, and so if I give an answer that's different than Leo's or vice versa, it's not that there's I'm not saying that one is more right than the other. I'm just really speaking to more of my experience, and so and I assume that's kind of what you're looking for too. Just how both of us kind of make sense of these things. And so the way I would go about this is when it comes to the burden of proof, I do think that a person who makes a certain claim has a certain level of obligation to kind of prove that claim or show evidence for it if they want it to be taken seriously. I mean, I can say just about anything, but if I don't back it up, it's just empty words. So if you're actually wanting to enter the world of critical thought and real ideas that are hoping to be taken seriously, you kind of need to walk into that ball game prepared to do so. And so if that's what you're looking for, I would say, yeah, the burden of proof, you need to back up what you're saying, or else people aren't going to take you seriously. On the flip side to that, I also think that the burden of proof actually lies on the individual looking into the issue. So if we take a truth claim, like the LDS Church is true, that's pretty expansive, that deals with a lot of things. But if an individual is wanting to learn to figure that out, my approach with that is just that they have the obligation to weigh the sides for and against and in between, and just reach their own conclusion. There's this quote from Joseph Smith, and he says that by proving contraries, the truth is made manifest. And the word prove in that sense, it's kind of archaic, but it's more just like by testing, by trying, or by analyzing, right? With these different arguments, by weighing them, ultimately we should rest assured that the truth will come out on top. That doesn't always take place because we reach different conclusions, but as far as what you find to be true and the conclusion that you reach, that's the process that you should take is weighing everything in an open manner. So I think, just for me, it depends on the perspective you're speaking to. Generally, yes, the person making the claim has the burden of proof. But the person assessing that claim also has the same burden of making sure they're approaching that argument in a fair and just kind of as neutral and objective manner as possible. I mean, we all enter these discussions and with our own backgrounds, and so it's easy to project kind of our preconceived ideas into them. You have to deal with confirmation bias, all these different things. They're kind of unavoidable in a lot of ways. But I think there's approaches that you can take to lessen their impact. And one of them is just, weighing everything on the table, pro, con, apologetic, critical, whatever, put it all out there. And at least for me, doing that is going to give you the greatest chance to kind of, look for patterns, look for weaker or stronger arguments, and hopefully the truth will be made manifest in that way. So, that's kind of my answer with that.
Nice. So I think we are 100% on the same page about this. I like the Joseph Smith quote. I'll give my brief answer to this. Wasn't really. It's only going to be a recapitulation. This is sort of my Joseph Smith. That's Carl Sagan, and this is to do with the open-mindedness. This is sort of response to Leo's comment about people who say Mormonism isn't true. Now, obviously, I'm on the camp that believes that, but I don't like the attitude in principle of that. So this is, again, Carl Sagan quote. He said, "At the heart of science is an essential balance between two seemingly contradictory attitudes, an openness to new ideas, no matter how bizarre or counterintuitive they may be, and the most ruthless skeptical scrutiny of all ideas, old and new. This is how deep truths are winnowed from deep nonsense." Mm-hmm. I think we'd all agree about that, and I think we're 100% on the same page. In principle, that means that any other religion could and should be assessed for its truth value.
I would say so.
Yeah, and I think that I'll just highlight this, and I'm pretty sure you'll both agree. If someone came to me off the street today and said, "I saw aliens, they're real, they just appeared to me," then I would ask them, what evidence do you have to support that? Because we know that eyewitness testimony is one of the worst, versions of evidence to provide for something. Mm-hmm. So if they provided no evidence, I would be free to not believe their claim in this instance by saying, I have no reason to believe that you actually saw aliens. But that doesn't mean that I completely prohibit myself from ever believing in aliens or ever believing that that person saw them. Mm-hmm. It just means that in this instance, I have no reason to believe that that's the case. So I think you're probably both in agreement with that. So I think the next question in relation to that is fairly similar. Are you both familiar with Russell's teapot, Bertrand Russell's teapot argument?
Is that the teapot in space argument?
That's right, yeah.
Yeah, I'm familiar with that.
Yeah. So I guess then, in principle, you agree with the idea that the burden, this is really just to illustrate the burden of proof. That's where Russell's teapot comes from.
Yeah.
But, yeah. Okay, good. Good. Then let's go to section.
Oh, you get to a point, too, when we're throwing out these kind of metaphysical claims that can't necessarily be proven one way or the other by just empirical knowledge, right? It gets to the point where we could be talking about teapots in space, or we could be talking about Lord of the Rings or something like that, right? Mm-hmm. And much the same effect. I think there's value to those discussions for sure, but perhaps they're not touching on really the critical issues that we have the potential to speak about in a reasonable and responsible way. You know what I'm saying?
Well, sure. Just to illustrate, the reason I don't believe in the metaphysical, to use my language that I just used, is because I have no reason to believe.
Yeah.
Based on what I've analyzed. That doesn't mean in principle that the metaphysical might not exist. It just means I have, at this time, no reason to believe in that. Now, that doesn't mean I've not considered it seriously over a long time. Same with the two of you. Okay, cool. So let's go and talk about what Leo was saying, which I think this is really the heart of the issue here, is how can someone know that the LDS Church is true? Please describe the process, basically. And I think that, you know, you'll be putting on your missionary hats, even though missionaries don't wear hats, you know, to answer this question, because there are currently some 60-something thousand LDS missionaries around the world, and they're speaking with people on the street or in their homes, and basically they're asserting that the truth, you know, the church is true, and they're saying you can come to know it's true yourself, and they're giving a specific process. And I really want to investigate that process, because I think that is really the heart of the issue.
Okay. Now, do you want to personalize this as far as how we each came to kind of our own conclusion, or just speak about these things in general?
You're welcome to personalize it.
Okay.
I think that we'll extract the general ideas out of your stories.
For me personally, I'm very much a skeptic, is how I describe myself, in that I'm not someone who can just hear a claim being said and be comfortable just going along with it, right? Much to the line of reasoning with Russell's teapot, you know, I kind of want reasons to believe, right? Otherwise, we're just dealing with empty claims, which could go either way. And so for me, when I was going through my years of faith crisis, I was very much open to the possibility of God not existing, of, you know, being atheist, of another religion being true, of Mormonism being the true. I kind of approach things in a close to an agnostic manner, and that, you know, I was even open to maybe I won't even be able to figure this out. And for me personally, what has led me to believe and take this path of Mormonism at this point in time is due to the rational evidence that I see for it, which we'll dive into later, for and against, and the subjective, spiritual, metaphysical experiences that I believe I have experienced. When it comes to those things, I don't necessarily believe that anyone, upon hearing my experiences, the things that really are just subjective and only I know that I've gone through, I don't believe that those are enough to convince anyone. And I don't think anyone should necessarily become Mormon based off my word, right? Don't take my word for it. And so what I see in Mormonism, and what's common with the missionaries, is you'll usually have them go to Moroni 10, 4 through 5, where it kind of gives a basic approach that many missionaries and many members of the church have used to kind of personally validate to themselves the truth claims of the LDS Church. I think there's strengths and weaknesses to it. What I like about it is that it pushes individuals to have that personal experience for themselves. And so it's not just, you know, believe us for the sake of believing us. It's believe it because you've experienced something. You know, I think it's open to debate whether or not one can use just solely that approach to arrive at truth in a sound and consistent manner. I think the data would, you know, even show otherwise. And so for me, it was a mix of both my rational investigation of Mormonism based off, you know, evidence and arguments on its behalf, but then also those subjective experiences that testified to me. So when it comes to those subjective experiences, those are personal. They were paradigm shifting for me, and really, I'm the only one that should be convinced by them, just because, you know, I'm the only one that's experienced them. When it comes to the evidence, when it comes to the kind of objective information that's out there and the arguments that can be based off of it, that's something we can all engage with. And so, you know, Shawn, you mentioned that you don't necessarily believe in the metaphysical because you have no reason to, right? And I don't blame you for that. I wouldn't want you to have a belief based off, you know, just a lack or an empty a leap of complete blind faith, right? So I don't blame you for that. But I will say that just one of the reasons that I'm a Mormon is because of what I've experienced. And that's something that's personal. That's something that's subjective. I totally understand that. I don't hold that to anyone else as, you know, this validates ultimate reality for everyone. It just validates what I've experienced, and that's just what I base my journey off of. And so one thing that I appreciate with Moroni 10, 3 through 5 is just that it gets people comfortable with opening themselves up to that experience if that does exist. And so if they experience it, they can, you know, reach the conclusion that they want with it, whether or not, you know, it means all of Mormonism is true or that the Book of Mormon is just a good book. That's up for debate as well. But something that can't necessarily be debated is that an experience has been had, you know, but the meaning of that experience can be debated. And so for me, when it comes to truth, when it comes to approaching what is real, I just try and go about in an open mind. You know, I'm limited by my own perspective, by the background and kind of preconceived ideas that I'm coming from. But I just move forward in a way that I'm staying authentic and honest to my own rational understanding of things and to my own subjective spiritual experiences too. And in some ways, I think that's all any of us can do. And so for me, you know, when I see that taught in Mormonism, others might disagree, but you know, I believe that my faith teaches me that, just in that it advises me to study it out in my mind and to seek after those experiences. And so for me, that's just kind of how I reached my conclusion in a long-winded way. So I kind of apologize for that if that was too rambling.
No, that's good. That's good. All right. Well, I do have a few questions regarding that, and then we'll turn to Leo. So really, this is about the nature of the claims of Mormonism and objective reality. The way you've described this sort of subjective experience, at least based on the original understanding I had of Mormonism, the one I taught when I was a missionary, is that the LDS Church makes claims about the purpose of life for everyone.
Yeah.
The purpose of everyone's life, not just mine or yours. So, I mean, would you agree that the claims themselves are objective in nature, or are they subjective?
Well, they're definitely exclusive truth claims, and they claim to represent something about reality. I think it's going to differ on the individual what exactly they represent and how literal or nuanced they make that. Because I can say that personally, I have views that aren't completely the same as other Mormons. I'm free to have that, and so all of us just kind of approach things with different understandings in that regard. But you know, as the matter of the claims that they're making, like let's say that God exists, that's kind of an objective claim about reality. And then there's a bunch of other objective claims that you could throw in there as well. And so, yeah, I would say, you know, Mormonism depicts a whole unique system of metaphysics, of objective reality, of how matter and spirit are connected. You know, there's a lot of things that it describes. It depends on who you're talking to and what exactly they accept or not. And so everyone's understanding of Mormonism might differ a little bit to that respect. But there's a lot of data that Mormonism brings to the table. And there are parts of it, because they're coming from individual persons making objective truth claims. Not all of it you'll find is consistent. And that doesn't mean that Mormonism of itself is inconsistent, but just that you have a lot of people describing what Mormonism is, and they're speaking from a subjective point of view. And naturally, they're going to kind of disagree in places on what that entails. And so, you know, my Mormonism is going to be a little bit different than another person's Mormonism. I mean, the same could be said for essentially any worldview. You know, people are just going to, you know, believe different things. But yeah, there is variation. And so there's going to be dispute among it. There's a common saying that if you have two Jews in a room, you'll have three opinions. I would say the same thing about Mormons, right? I've talked to quite a few different Mormons that come from a lot of different perspectives, and some of them are they completely disagree on sometimes fundamental things. So I think it just depends.
Okay, no, that's good. The reason I say this is I'm trying to be as formal as possible in terms of the LDS Church itself. I completely understand that individual Mormons can and will have very different worldviews. We all know that crazy high priest guy who sits in priesthood talking about random stuff. Yeah, but I guess fundamentally, and maybe I'll refer to the missionary manual, Preach My Gospel, is that it describes, based on the scripture you mentioned, Moroni 10:3-5, that the way you can come to know it's true is essentially through prayer to God, to have a subjective experience of sorts, what in Mormonism is called a spiritual experience. Generally, people call it a religious experience. And that through this experience, you can come to know that that's a witness from God to you personally, that's true. Mm-hmm. So my understanding, and again, you can correct me if I'm wrong, I might have got it wrong, but I'm pretty confident that the overall claim is there's an objective purpose to life, and as per the plan of salvation. You can go to Preach My Gospel to read what the sort of contemporary formalized narrative of that is. And this is claimed to be true, and the way you can know, which is a good thing. Mormonism actually tells you a way to know. Many religions just say it's true and that's it. But the way you can know is to pray about it and receive a divine witness in the form of the Holy Ghost, witnessing to your soul that it's true. So correct me if I'm wrong, but I think for both of you, and again, Leo, you can share your story if you'd like to, but for both of you, I assume the final conclusion, you mentioned rationality on one side, but there is a heavy leaning onto the religious experience side, right?
I would say so. And I wouldn't say Mormonism kind of teaches pure fideism, right? I would say, it takes into consideration a rational component as well. I would say the emphasis, though, is on seeking out those personal subjective experiences and figuring out, and using those as a means to determine, your personal beliefs and how you view the world. We're in agreement, essentially.
Yeah, cool. Leo, do you want to share briefly then how and why you believe? And I don't mean to minimize your story, you're free to share it, but if it is very much along the lines of what we've been talking about, you can just go ahead and say that.
A little different. Yeah, now you know why I brought Jaxon along, man. This kid, he's an all-star. Sure. I nicknamed him the, what did I nickname you, Jaxon? The tiger in the forest or something like.
Oh, I don't know.
Putting smart.
Okay.
Cool. I have a long ways to go.
I know you do. You're too humble. So yeah, my experience. It's just very simple. But I'm also a skeptic. I didn't realize it at the time. I was a teenager and didn't really know what skepticism was. I wasn't as educated as Jaxon is at 18, obviously. But yeah, I was reading the Book of Mormon when I was a teenager, and and this is unique. I think, I don't know if anybody else out there, I'm sure there's somebody, but I've never met somebody that's read this and that had the experience I did. But I was reading in Omni, and it's verse 9, and it says, "Now I, Chemish, write what few things I write in the same book with my brother. For behold, I saw the last which he wrote, that he wrote it with his own hand, and he wrote it in the day that he delivered them unto me. And after this manner we keep the records, for it is according to the commandments of our fathers, and I make an end." So you might be thinking, like, why does that? What is that? And as I was reading the Book of Mormon, the thought in the back of my head was, did Joseph Smith write this? And when I read that passage, that one verse of this random guy named Chemish, that his whole purpose was, I've got to make a note in these plates that I've got, and then I make an end and pass them on to the next guy. And I was like, why would Joseph write that? It doesn't make any sense. And my rational mind thought, it doesn't really make sense. Why would he do that? And so at that point, I actually kneeled down and asked God, I was like, what is this? Is this really true? Did Joseph write this, or did someone else write this? That's the only, those are the only two options. I mean, other people have theories out there, but Joseph was the one that was dictating and all that. So it came from his, his mouth. So I thought, maybe he wrote this, but when I read that, and I just thought, how could he make that up? That's just crazy. I mean, it's so random. So that's when I was overcome with this light and this beautiful feeling from outside of me. I mean, it was, and of course, there's a study I was going to bring up there that they did at the U. It's called "This Is Your Brain on God." Kind of an interesting study research that they did. You seen that? Yeah.
Yes, I have. I've seen that.
Pointing, yeah. So I mean, that's cool, man, because we've got some scientific, backing here to say there is something going on physiologically, neurologically with us when we experience the Holy, we call the Holy Ghost, right? And so I just thought that was really cool that science is showing at least that there is some kind of, it's not just made up. It is actually physiological. It's something is happening. And, we could argue about the God gene or, what is, what is causing this to happen, but it's just so overwhelming that the experiences that we have as members of the church. For me on my mission, the first time I testified of Joseph Smith, in the Grove, it's just like I barely even understood the language. I was speaking Spanish in Uruguay. That's my flag up there in the back. You can see it. But man, the Spirit was like, I describe it as like a column of light, just like Joseph described it. I describe it as like a column of light coming down from heaven and just filling the room with like this pure, beautiful, sweet feeling. And I was looking at this guy, this old guy that he could barely understand my broken language. And I was like, I said, "Me entiende," like in my broken Spanish. And he looked at me with tears in his eyes and he was like, "See," it's like the most amazing, beautiful experience. And it happened to me countless times on my mission. And Shawn, I mean, the faith crisis happened to me too after the mission. And I had to rely on that deep reservoir of spiritual experiences for quite a while. And I had to dig deep and remember those experiences. But as I researched more and more, and I went to God, in very serious prayer, like, is this real? Is this true? Is it still true? And he softened my heart and, continued to give answers to my prayers. And I don't know. It's, there's something, it's subjective. Yes. I may have been conditioned. Yes. But, there are people that have no idea what the church is. They pick up a Book of Mormon, they read it, and they gain a testimony right there on the spot. They don't even get to Moroni, So there's that. There is this evidence of like, these people we're spiritual beings. We're built for whatever reason. If it's an evolved thing, I mean, why? Why are we spiritual beings? Why does religion perpetuate our species? I don't think so. There's some really bad stuff that happens.
I think that's a good question to ask,
right? So for some reason, I think we're spiritual beings, and that subjective evidence for some of us, I mean, it's just so powerful that it's just hard to deny it. So that's my answer.
Okay. Very, very good. Okay. So I really do want to dwell on your responses because I think they were great and they were basically exactly what I was looking to discuss. And I'm sure that you know that. So the first one is about Chemish. I'm only just going to mention a side note here. When I read the Book of Mormon after not believing it anymore, and I looked at it with a different pair of eyes, I actually realized that it spends a lot of time talking about how it's true. And that's something that I think is one of those observations that it's sort of like the anachronisms. You don't notice it until someone points it out. Mm-hmm. And when I went back and read the Book of Mormon, I was actually surprised by the number of times it keeps asserting and reasserting its own truthfulness. And that's an interesting example of that. Now, religious experiences, this is something I want to dwell on at length because I think this is really the crux of the issue. Now, for different religions, different things are sort of their door hinge, right? In Preach My Gospel, chapter 5, I think, it speaks about the Book of Mormon and how the truthfulness of the church swings with the Book of Mormon. If it's true, then Joseph Smith as a prophet was true. The modern prophets are true. There's this cascade reaction of truth, all right? And if it's not true, then basically everything goes away. And I think we all agree if the Book of Mormon is not true, then the religion is at best it's not what it claims to be, right? So and then if you zoom in to the Book of Mormon as the door that everything swings on, its own hinge is the spiritual witness. So it's like a hinge within a hinge, so to say. The truthfulness of the whole church rests on the Book of Mormon, and the truthfulness of the Book of Mormon, based on its own theology, rests on the spiritual witness. That's the absolute foundation. And exactly what you just said about this reservoir of spiritual experiences, this lies at the heart of the Mormon experience. Religious experience is at the heart of the Mormon theology, right? And exactly what you've said is I don't mean to belittle it. I believe you feel exactly what you've described. Of course, I think it's something else, but that's a different story. I completely believe it. And the reason is because I've had the same experiences. And when I was a missionary, similar to you, I had many religious experiences. And I've thought about them extensively since transitioning out. And I actually have a podcast even called the Mormon Spiritual Experiences Podcast. And the idea of this podcast is to explore secular models of religious experiences, to say, what could these things be? Now, I've only gotten a few episodes in because I'm quite busy, but I've done a lot of research on it, and I find it a very fascinating topic. And yes, the burning in the bosom, etc., that feeling I've had. Now, this brings me to the follow-up questions, which I think are extremely, extremely important, which is, so I'd assume both of you, in short, it's quite clear from your responses, both of you are 100% yes, you had a spiritual experience or many spiritual experiences in connection with being believing Mormons. And those have reinforced this belief system repeatedly, right? And so the challenge, there are quite a few challenges to this model that, again, this is what I want to ask. How do you, because both of you are still believing, so somehow you've resolved these challenges, and I'm curious to hear how you've resolved them. So there are a number of issues, right? And there are two categories of issues I'd call. The one I'd call the soft issues, which means they're not deal breakers, and the other I'd call hard issues, which I believe are deal breakers. So the soft issues are, for example, people praying to know if the Book of Mormon is true. On my mission, some people who prayed to know it was true came back and told me that they received the answer that it's not true. And in circumstances like that, usually we tend to blame that person. We say, well, something, you must have done something wrong, or you're not open-minded enough, etc., etc. But what would your responses be? Let's say someone prayed, they believe in God, they believe that he can communicate with them. They prayed to know if the Book of Mormon is true, and they received the answer from God, or what they think is the answer from God, saying it's not. And there are many people who fit in this category. How do you respond to that? What do you say to them? It's not me, I'm not claiming that, but other people have.
Yeah.
Go ahead, Jaxon.
Okay. Well, I can definitely, I want to validate their experience, and I want to validate what they felt, much the same way, Shawn, that you validated, what Leo and I have both experienced. I don't think any of us are in a position to speak authoritatively on each other's subjective experiences, and say, well, objectively, that did not take place and you are wrong, right? The very nature of it precludes us from doing that. I think I would actually, if someone prayed and received that answer, Shawn, I would say, okay, that's the way that you should live your life right now. I think it's somewhat of a flawed approach to make too hard of judgment calls about them for the same reason I just talked about. Because how can you authoritatively say that, you must just be doubting too much, or you must, there must be something within you that's inhibiting you. You can definitely speculate, and I don't think there's harm throwing out possible explanations. But I think, if Mormons are trying to use the method of prayer, the method of subjective spiritual experience as their means to determining truth, they need to respect where that takes individual people at certain points of their life. There's people who They pray about the Book of Mormon early on, and they receive a witness that it's true at certain years in their life. Later, they do the same method, and they receive a different answer, or vice versa. So I think this shows one of the weaknesses when it comes to relying on fideism, or subjective experience of determining ultimate reality in a very objective way. Just because, again, the very fact that people are reaching different conclusions with this method shows that it's not 100% conclusive. And we can discuss why that is. But I would say those individuals, no matter who you are, you have an obligation to move forward in an authentic manner, consistent with what you've experienced and what you understand. And for me, that's how I see God judging each of us. He judges us based off our understanding and based off the decisions that we make, based off our experiences and the data that we're processing. And so having a mom that left the church, having family members who, are no longer active and who have decided otherwise, I respect their journeys. And so, I would say to them that, I believe personally that God's plan for each of us is inclusive enough to where it can lead us both inside and outside of this institution that I call the church. I think if God wanted people in mortality to be Mormon, he did a pretty poor job at making that happen, just given the demographics. There's 15 million Mormons today, probably less than half of them are active, right? And not to mention everyone who's ever lived or ever will live, right? And so I think we're judged more, and the emphasis is more on our understanding what we experience and what we do based off that experience and the authenticity that we move forward with. And there's definitely weaknesses to trying to just establish ultimate reality based off a personal subjective experience. I think it gives us the obligation to move forward. Like I said, it can change paradigms. It can make us see things in a different light and, understand things differently. But I think, again, and I kind of mentioned this with the burden of proof discussion, really the only person that can be affected by that subjective experience is the person themselves, right? And so I would just say, be authentic to that, continue to be open-minded, continue to be open to the possibility that in the future you could experience something different, and this goes both sides, both for people who are LDS and who aren't. I would just say, continue living life, continue thinking and reasoning and studying, both with the possibility that it might and might not be true. Just be authentic to that. That's the advice I would give. That might, maybe some Mormons might disagree with that, but that's just where I'm at and where I speak to. So, I respect other points of view as well.
I feel like that's a very honest response. Thank you. Very good.
Yeah. Leo, do you want to add anything?
So there is that's definitely well said, Jackson. Good for you, brother.
Yeah, and feel free to disagree with me if you ever need to as well.
Yeah. No, so I'll just add a little bit of, a little clarity on how I see these unique or mutually exclusive truth claims that we talk about in the church. I mean, you hinted this, Shawn, that if the Book of Mormon is true, it's the keystone of our religion. The whole thing comes with it, right? So, assuming that Brigham actually was supposed to be the prophet and all that, right? So, but
in truth, I like that you touched on that. In truth, the model presented in Preach My Gospel is oversimplified. There are actually many hinges upon which the truth claims of the LDS Church lie, and you just mentioned one is the succession crisis and Brigham Young.
Yes, exactly.
Yeah, keep going.
The idea is if God exists and he is a God that does not lie, would he tell one person one thing and one person a different thing? That's a good question to ask, right? is this God a God of truth, or is he deceptive? And my Calvinist friends out there, I'm totally depraved, and we all are,
Aren't we all?
and we all, I'm a sinner. I need Jesus in my life. And you know what? If someone else has a different experience and I have a different experience from them, I'm just going to have to fall back on what I've experienced and say, because there's people that have gone a long time. I mean, Brigham took like 2 years or something to get, his confirmation about the truth claim. And
some people never even experience that in the church too, and they just remain active members.
Yep,
That's correct.
That's true.
Yeah.
So I guess it's something we have to, withhold judgment, like you said. But if in reality that people are, their subjective reality is true, and they're actually, God is telling them that it's not true, and I'm receiving a confirmation that it is, then I guess we have to be careful with that, because that would mean that God is a God of lies. And so obviously that throws a huge wrench into this whole thing, and I just can't accept that. So I'm not going to pass. It's the difference between judging people, and discerning what we think is probably true for us personally, and what's good for them. Maybe try to help them in a kind way. But passing judgment is something I'm not comfortable with doing. But at the same time, I've got to hold true to what I've experienced, because I just can't deny it.